you are now ready to begin the first exercise of Blanchitsu, i.e. slapping on the paint. Ensure that you are comfortable and that you have everything needed to hand. Apply the first coats of paint, starting with the largest areas: tunic, armour, arms, legs, head, etc. At this stage, make no attempt to shade. Just apply the chosen colours to the model. If you allow the brush to follow the shape of the casting, it will last longer and not show too many signs of wear. Don't worry about small areas of detail or equipment at this juncture. Just concentrate on making a neat job of the major features. Once you have completed all of the basic colours, put the model aside to dry. With the first stage completed and the model now absolutely dry, you may begin adding shadows to the figure. The most effective way of representing the natural darkening of shadows, clothing, creases, etc. is by using a colour wash. This is simply a diluted mix of a darker shade of the base colour. For example, brown rather than the light brown, dark red rather than red, grey rather than white. The chart shows you how you can create darker shades using Citadel colour paint. By experimentation, you will soon learn how to darken paint tones by adding different colours or shades together. The proportion of paint to water in the wash is a matter of personal preference, required effect, and the density of the particular paint being used. Trial and error will enable you to judge this most effectively. It would be foolish for us to lay down strict ratios of paint to water, so you will have to develop a feel for it. Aim for a consistency similar to that of milk, allowing the paint to flow into the crevices and creases of the figure. A wash should not be so thick that the base colour is completely masked, nor should it be so watery that it dries in distinct puddles. Many of the Citadel figures illustrated in White Dwarf are shaded not by a standard paint wash, but using coloured ink. A mixture of ink and water is ideal for creating a wash. The pigment used for ink carries extremely well when diluted and appears to me much finer than that used in paint. You can buy artists' inks from art shops, but these are extremely expensive and you will need a full range. The good news is that Citadel are planning a range of inks in the not too distant future. Who says no one ever listens to us? We said, who says? I'll forget it. Watch out for further details in White Dwarf. As stated above, the colour chart we've given here isn't the be-all and end-all for colour mixing. The exact shade required may vary depending upon the mood of the figure, surrounding colours, and your own style. However, the chart is a good starting point. You will notice that wherever possible, a darker version of the base colour is used, dark blue to shade mid-blues, and crimson to shade bright red, for example. This is better than simply adding black to your original shade. Adding black does work up to a point, but the effect of adding black is to make the tone darker, whereas what you really want is a tone that is deeper, i.e. you want a good strong dark blue over a mid-blue, not a dirty blue-grey. Yellow is particularly prone to discoloration if black is added, for which reason a light red-brown is to be preferred. Likewise, white will look very cold and artificial if shaded by black or grey alone. A light beige or blue-grey are better, the latter lending an air of dignity to nobles or elves. If you have not attempted to shade using the wash technique before, you may wish to experiment with several different densities and colour contrasts before setting on a style you prefer. Observe the way light falls upon real objects, people and clothes. Notice how much darker creases and shaded areas appear. Even clothes of a single bright hue appear lighter or darker as they follow the contours of the body or fall into creases. When trying to replicate this effect in miniature, you will have to exaggerate the density and area of shadow in order to achieve what will appear as a realistic result. This is a general rule for working in miniatures. Colours must be overstated, just as the miniature's anatomy of the model is overstated by the sculptor. If you were to take a real person and shrink them down to the size of a Citadel model, they would appear extremely puny and, in model terms, boring. Just as you would not look twice at an accurately scaled model, no one is going to look twice at a model which uses only very subtle shades of dull colours. Overemphasis is what you ought to try to achieve. Again, refer to the photographs. Once you have finished applying washes to your model, you must now put it aside and allow it to dry properly. When it is completely dry, the model is ready for the next stage, highlighting. For this, you will require your cheap or older brush, as the technique of dry brushing quickly ruins good brushes. To begin with, use your brush to mix a small amount of white with the base colour onto your palette. Then wipe most of the pigment from the brush. Slowly draw the bristles of the brush against the area to be highlighted, drawing against the lines of the sculpture if possible. Some of the dried pigment will brush off the bristles onto the raised areas of detail and well delineated edges. You will notice how this immediately creates a highlight. This should be repeated once again using a lighter shade and a slightly lighter brush stroke. The model should now take on a 3D effect. Continue to highlight the different base colours until this stage is complete. As with shading, exaggerated effect gives the best results. We have occasionally heard that it is said that there is no need to shade or highlight models, and that the natural surrounding light provides its own shadows and highlights. This is simply nonsense. The depressions and raised portions of a miniature probably show a marked difference of no more than 3mm, and are mostly in the order of 1mm or less. In real life, this figure is more a matter of several inches. The way that light falls upon the miniature and the real life object is totally different. Even the restricted light from a window diffuses around a small model in a way it cannot do in the case of a large object. If your subject includes armour, either in the form of plates of metal or mail type armour, the basic techniques of wash and dry brush will give a good result. For plate armour, a base of silver can be washed with black. When mixing a wash to shade armour, add a little more water than you normally would to allow the metallic base colour to shine through. Dry brush with silver. The highlights on metal should be clearer and cleaner than on cloth. Experiment until you get an effect that you like. If you want to simulate rust, weathering or battle damage, wait until the highlighting is completely dry and apply a wash of orange or brown. This technique can also be used generally over the whole figure to give it a weather-beaten appearance, but be careful not to overdo it. As a rule, metallic colours should be left to dry for slightly longer than normal pigments. If you apply a wash over a metallic shade before it is properly dry, it will run horribly. Avoid too much brushwork when shading, or you will scrub away the base coat. It is now time to attend to any such areas not yet painted. This will include details such as belts, helmets, hair, feet, pouches, plumes, trappings, weapons, etc. The same techniques are used as for the larger areas, but you will have to be even more careful. Not only are the areas smaller and more fiddly, but you must avoid spoiling work already completed. Be especially careful not to splash surrounding areas with your washes. This stage can be awkward, especially if the model features a lot of detail which is difficult to get at. Once you have painted a few models, you will be able to identify those areas which are more convenient to paint initially, and those which are better left until last. When the whole model has been painted, shaded and highlighted, the next stage is outlining. To do this, you will need to use your finest brush, bringing it to a good point and taking only a little paint upon its tip. Outline all of the areas where one part of the model joins another, such as the joint between sleeve and hand, where the tunic joins the breeches, the edge of the belts, where the helmet or hair meets the face, etc. This method is used by historical wargamers to paint whole armies, usually employing black to outline the crisp colours of military uniforms. When dealing with armies, this looks extremely good, but for individual models, a less stark effect works better. For general outlining, dark grey or dark brown are the most effective, depending upon the colour of areas being outlined. If an area is especially dark, or if the contrast is especially sharp, such as cloth and metal, black may be used. Mix the required colour with water until you get a consistency that flows easily, but still gives a good opaque line. Often, it is sufficient to merely dip the tip of the brush in water to freshen up the paint without spoiling the tip. This counteracts the rapid evaporation of water and the fast drying time of the paint itself. Outlining requires a steady hand and a degree of patience. Okay, a degree in patience. See the photo for a demonstration of the famous John Blanche, elbows locked to desk, wrists locked together, holding breath technique. With the outlining complete, you may wish to pause for breath before adding the fun bits, such as runes, rips, cuts, buttons, badges, patterning, and so on. The technique used is essentially that for outlining, although carrying the colours as required. You may wish to go back and outline these elements again once they are dry, using a suitable shade to do so. The face is often said to be the focal point of the carefully presented model. Painting a face is not especially difficult so long as you are prepared to invest a bit of time in getting it right. This is the John Blanche face painting method. Everyone has their own style, their own approach, and their own ideal, so be prepared to adapt these ideas to your own needs. Just as shading and highlighting were deliberately exaggerated to give the figure depth, so faces are also exaggerated. It is true the typical Blanche visage leans toward the darker side of life, but in our judgment the method works, producing attractive and evocative faces. The face should receive its base coat, wash and highlights during the normal painting routine. In addition, extra highlighting is applied to the nose, and a black wash is applied into the eye sockets. Lips are added in the desired colour, normally a mix of red, yellow and white for human coloured creatures. A dark red-brown line will separate the lips, or dark crimson in the base of open mouths. Tusks and teeth are spotted in carefully. If you accidentally get white paint onto the lips, you can easily paint over the mistake. Eyes are spotted in with white, carefully following the moulding. When dry, a small dot is added for the pupil. The top of the eye is then outlined using black, somewhat like a line of black mascara. If you allow this line to drop slightly onto the eye itself, you will create the impression of an eyelid, preventing the eye from staring. There are other ways to paint faces, but we shall return to these in a future article. Advanced techniques of Blanchitsu may be dangerous in the hands of those who are not yet truly learned in the control of their powers. When the face is complete, your model is all but finished. All that you will need to do now is decorate and paint the base. Again, this is a diverse subject, and one which we shall return to in a future article. Fortunately, one of the most simple methods is also one of the most effective, and is often used for models shown in White Dwarf. You will need PVA, which is woodworking glue, and a very old brush or even a cocktail stick. Paint a layer of glue onto the top of the model's base, being careful to avoid the feet. Then sprinkle ordinary sand onto the glue and allow it to dry. This surface can be painted green to represent grass or brown-grey to represent bare earth. Dry brush with a suitable lighter shade to complete the base. It may be advantageous to outline the model's feet or to apply a dark wash around the figure's feet to lift it out of the basing material. We said that all you needed to do was the base. Well, yes, the figure is now complete, but if you want to preserve your careful paint job, you must apply varnish. The most convenient type of varnish comes in spray cans and is applied in the same way as a white undercoat. Art shops sell suitable varnish in both matte and gloss forms, whilst garages sell gloss varnish alongside their range of car paints. The Blanchitsu school of thought, however, scorns such devices in favour of a huge tin of household polyurethane varnish and a brush. By applying several coats, a touch protective layer is built up and the figure takes on the sheen of fine porcelain. With all this varnish, John Blanche models tend to acquire a yellow tint after a while, but this is quite pleasing in itself. The application of varnish is admittedly a question of personal preference, and you may prefer the flat effect of matte varnish or a somewhat thinner layer of gloss varnish. In any case, matte varnish is not as good a protective coat as gloss. If you prefer a flat finish, it is best to apply a thin coat of gloss and then a thin layer of matte. Armour weapons and bare metal should look glossy in any case. A small tin of gloss varnish and a brush can be used to selectively gloss up any detail you may choose. By John Blanche and Rick Priestley. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, then please be sure to like and subscribe, or even leave a comment. I always try my best to reply to them all. You can even now support the channel by joining the Patreon page, details of which are in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and always remember to drill your barrels.